The night Lucy Miller stopped talking, the rain was falling so hard you could barely see the road ahead. She was sitting in the back seat of her parents' car, holding a small stuffed rabbit her mother had given her that morning for her 7th birthday. The windshield wipers were moving fast, but they could not keep up with the storm. Her father was driving slowly, carefully, his hands tight on the wheel. Her mother turned around and smiled at her. She said something Lucy would never forget. She said, "We are almost home, sweetheart. Just a few more minutes." Those were the last words Lucy ever heard from her mother. The truck came out of nowhere. It ran through a red light and hit their car on the driver's side. The sound was something Lucy would hear in her nightmares for years. Metal against metal, glass breaking, her mother screaming. And then, silence. A terrible, empty silence that seemed to swallow everything. When Lucy woke up in the hospital 3 days later, she was alone. A nurse with kind eyes told her that her parents were gone. Lucy did not cry. She did not scream. She just stared at the ceiling and said nothing. The doctors thought she was in shock. They said she would talk when she was ready. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months, and Lucy never spoke again. Her grandmother, a gentlewoman named Rose, took her in after she left the hospital. Rose had a small house at the edge of town, with a garden full of flowers and a kitchen that always smelled like fresh bread. She never pushed Lucy to talk. She never got frustrated or angry. She would simply hold Lucy's hand, brush her hair, and tell her stories about her mother when she was a little girl. For 2 years, Lucy lived with her grandmother, and those years were the closest thing to peace she would ever know. Rose taught her how to plant seeds and watch them grow. She taught her how to bake cookies and fold laundry and find shapes in the clouds. And even though Lucy never said a word, Rose understood her. A nod meant yes. A shake of the head meant no. A squeeze of the hand meant, "I love you." But life had more pain waiting for Lucy. One winter morning, Rose did not wake up. Lucy found her in bed, peaceful, like she was still sleeping. She sat beside her grandmother for hours, holding her cold hand, waiting for her to open her eyes. When the neighbors finally came and took Rose away, Lucy was truly alone in the world. The foster system was not kind to a silent girl. Social workers did not know what to do with her. Families did not know how to connect with a child who would not speak. Some thought she was being difficult. Others thought she was broken. One family kept her for 3 months before giving up. Another lasted only 6 weeks. Each time, Lucy packed her small bag and moved to a new house. A piece of her heart grew colder. By the time she was 10 years old, Lucy had lived in 4 different homes. She had learned to make herself invisible. She ate quietly. She did her homework quietly. She sat in the corner of classrooms and watched other children laugh and play, knowing she would never be one of them. Teachers wrote things in her file like unresponsive and emotionally distant. Kids at school called her names: the mute girl, the weird girl, the ghost. Lucy heard it all, but she never reacted. What was the point? Words had stopped meaning anything to her a long time ago. Her 5th foster home was different. Not better, really. Just different. It was a big old house that belonged to a woman named Mrs. Patterson, who took in foster kids mostly for the money the state paid her. There were 3 other children living there, all older than Lucy, and they ignored her completely. Mrs. Patterson was not cruel, but she was not kind either. She gave Lucy a small room in the attic and told her to stay out of trouble. The attic was dusty and cold, but Lucy did not mind. She liked being alone. She liked the quiet. There was a small window that looked out over the street, and she would sit there for hours watching cars pass by and people walking their dogs. It was during one of these long afternoons that she discovered the basement. She was not supposed to go down there. Mrs. Patterson had made that clear. But Lucy was curious, and she had nothing else to do. So one day, when everyone else was busy, she opened the basement door and walked down the creaky wooden stairs. The basement was full of old furniture and boxes covered in dust. There were broken chairs and stacks of old magazines and things that had been forgotten for years. But in the corner, hidden under a dirty sheet, it was a piano, an old upright piano with chipped wood and yellowed keys. Lucy walked toward it slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal. She reached out and touched one of the keys. The note that came out was soft and out of tune, but it was the most beautiful sound she had heard since the night of the accident. She pressed another key, then another. The sounds filled the basement and wrapped around her like a warm blanket. For the first time in years, Lucy felt something move inside her chest. It was small, like a tiny flame that had been waiting for air. She did not know how to play. She did not know anything about music, but her fingers kept moving across the keys, pressing and releasing, finding sounds that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. She sat at that piano for 3 hours. When she finally stopped, her hands were shaking. She looked down at the keys and felt tears running down her face. She had not cried since the accident. She had not allowed herself to feel anything at all. But now, sitting in this dusty basement, in front of this broken piano, everything she had been holding inside came pouring out. That night, Lucy lay in her small attic bed and thought about the piano. She thought about the way it felt under her fingers. She thought about the sounds she had made and how they seemed to say things she could never put into words. For the first time in a very long time, she wanted tomorrow to come. She wanted to go back down to that basement and play again. And she did. Every day, whenever she could sneak away without being noticed, Lucy went to the basement and sat at the piano. She taught herself by ear, picking out melodies from songs she had heard on the radio or remembered from her childhood. She made mistakes. She hit wrong notes. But she kept playing, because when her fingers touched those keys, she was not the silent girl anymore. She was not the orphan. She was not the foster kid nobody wanted. She was just Lucy. And Lucy had a voice, after all. It was not a voice made of words. It was something else. Something deeper. And it was the only thing in this world that made her feel alive. She had no idea that this broken piano in a forgotten basement was about to change her entire life. She had no idea that one day, the whole world would hear her play. All she knew was that she had found something worth living for, and she was never going to let it go. 4 years passed, and Lucy Miller grew from a small, quiet child into a tall, quiet teenager. She was 14 now, and she had lived in 7 different foster homes. Each time she moved, she left behind a little more hope. Each time she packed her worn backpack with her few belongings, she told herself not to get attached to anything or anyone. People always left. Homes never lasted. The only thing that stayed with her was the memory of that piano in Mrs. Patterson's basement, and the way it made her feel whole. But she could not take a piano with her. That was the hardest part. In every new home, every new neighborhood, Lucy searched for a way to play. It became like a hunger inside her, something she could not ignore. She found pianos in the strangest places. There was an old church 3 blocks from her 6th foster home that left its back door unlocked on Tuesday afternoons. Lucy would sneak in and play for hours in the empty hall, her music echoing off the stone walls. There was a community center near her 7th home with a piano in the corner that had sticky keys and a broken pedal. Nobody ever used it, so Lucy claimed it as her own. She never had lessons. She never had a teacher. She learned by listening to music on the radio and trying to copy what she heard. She found old sheet music in library book sales and taught herself to read the notes. It was slow and frustrating, but Lucy did not give up. She could not give up. Playing piano was the only time she felt like herself. It was the only time the silence inside her felt like a choice instead of a prison. When Lucy started high school, she was placed in a new foster home across town. This one was run by a tired couple who already had 3 other foster kids and did not have time to notice one more quiet girl. Lucy did not mind. She preferred being invisible. She went to school, did her homework, and kept her head down. The other students learned quickly that she did not talk, and most of them left her alone. Some called her names behind her back. Some laughed at her in the hallways. Lucy pretended not to hear. But there was one place at school where Lucy felt safe: the music room. It was at the end of a long hallway on the second floor, and it had an old upright piano pushed against the wall. Most students ignored it. They were too busy with guitars and drums and the latest pop songs. But Lucy saw that piano on her first day, and something clicked in her chest. She started staying after school, waiting until everyone left, then slipping into the music room to play. The music teacher was a man named Mr. Bennett. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and glasses that were always sliding down his nose. He had been teaching music for almost 30 years, and he had seen all kinds of students come and go. But he had never seen anyone like Lucy. The first time he heard her play, he was grading papers in his office next door. The sound drifted through the wall, soft at first, then building into something powerful and full of emotion. He stopped what he was doing and listened. When the music ended, he walked quietly to the door of the music room and looked inside. There was Lucy, sitting alone at the piano, her eyes closed, her hands resting on the keys. Mr. Bennett did not say anything. He did not want to scare her. He simply went back to his office and let her be. But he came back the next day. And the day after that, he would sit quietly in the hallway, just outside the door, and listen to her play. He heard Chopin, and Debussy, and Beethoven. He heard pieces that were meant for concert halls, played by a teenage girl who had never had a single lesson. It was impossible. And yet, it was happening. After 2 weeks, Mr. Bennett made a decision. He did not try to talk to Lucy. He knew she would not answer. Instead, he started leaving things for her. A book of Mozart's sonatas on the piano bench, a recording of a famous pianist on a small music player, sheet music for pieces he thought she might like. He never said a word about it. He just left the gifts and walked away. Lucy noticed. Of course she noticed. At first, she was confused. Then she was suspicious. But when she played through the Mozart sonatas and felt her heart swell with the beauty of the music, she understood. Someone was paying attention. Someone cared. She never thanked Mr. Bennett. She did not know how. But sometimes, when she finished playing, she would look toward his office door and give a small nod. And Mr. Bennett, watching through the crack in the door, would nod back. Months passed. Lucy's playing grew stronger and more confident. She tackled pieces that most professional pianists found challenging. She poured everything she had into the music. All the grief and loneliness and anger she had carried for so many years. When she played, it was like watching someone speak for the very first time. Every note was a word. Every phrase was a sentence. And every piece was a story only she could tell. One afternoon in spring, Mr. Bennett did something without asking Lucy's permission. He set up his phone on a shelf in the music room and pressed record. Then, he left and let her play. The piece she played that day was Chopin's Ballade, No. 1. It was one of the most difficult and emotional works in all of piano music. Lucy played it like her life depended on it. Her body swayed. Her fingers flew across the keys. And when she reached the final crashing chords, there were tears streaming down her face. Mr. Bennett watched the video that night and felt his own eyes burn. This girl had something special, something the world needed to hear. He sent the video to a local news station that was doing a story about hidden talents in the community. He did not expect much. Maybe a small segment. Maybe nothing at all. But the internet had other plans. The news station posted the video online. And within hours, it started spreading. People shared it on social media. They tagged their friends. They wrote comments about the mysterious girl who played piano like an angel but never said a word. By the end of the week, the video had been seen by over 2 million people. Lucy had no idea any of this was happening. She did not have a phone. She did not use social media. She went to school, played piano, and went back to her foster home like always. It was not until Mr. Bennett called her into his office one morning that she learned the truth. He showed her the video. He showed her the comments. He showed her the number of views, which had now climbed past 5 million. Lucy stared at the screen, her face pale, her hands trembling. Then Mr. Bennett showed her the email. It was from a producer at one of the biggest talent shows in the country. They had seen the video. They wanted Lucy to audition. Lucy read the email 3 times. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was everything she had never allowed herself to dream about. And it terrified her. Her foster mother said no at first. She told the producer that Lucy did not talk and could not handle the pressure. But Lucy did something she had not done in years. She made a choice for herself. She looked at her foster mother and nodded once. That nod meant yes. That nod meant she was ready. That nod was about to change everything. The audition was held in a massive convention center in the middle of the city. Lucy had never seen so many people in one place. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all waiting in long, winding lines that stretched around the building and out into the parking lot. Everyone was talking, laughing, practicing their songs, showing off for the cameras that roamed through the crowd. The energy was electric, filled with hope and nerves and dreams. Lucy stood near the back of the line with Mr. Bennett beside her. He had offered to come with her when he found out her foster mother could not take time off work. Lucy had nodded yes, grateful for a familiar face in this overwhelming sea of strangers. She was wearing her best clothes, which were not very nice at all. A simple blue dress she had found at a thrift store, and a pair of shoes that were slightly too big. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she carried nothing with her except a small card with her audition number printed on it. The wait was brutal. 6 hours in the hot sun, surrounded by people who would not stop talking. Lucy kept her eyes on the ground and tried to make herself as small as possible. But people noticed her anyway. They noticed the girl who stood completely still while everyone else fidgeted and practiced. They noticed the girl who never spoke, not even to the man standing next to her. A boy about her age was standing behind her in line. He had a guitar strapped to his back and a loud voice that carried over the crowd. He tried to talk to Lucy 3 different times. He asked her name. He asked what she was going to perform. He asked if she was nervous. Lucy did not respond to any of it. She just looked at him with her calm, dark eyes, until he finally gave up. "What is wrong with her?" he muttered to his friend, loud enough for Lucy to hear. "Is she deaf or something?" Mr. Bennett stepped forward, ready to say something, but Lucy put her hand on his arm. She shook her head slightly. It was not worth it. She had heard worse things in her life. Much worse. As the hours passed, the line slowly moved forward. People went inside the building and came back out with different expressions. Some were crying with joy. Some were crying with disappointment. Some looked angry. Some looked relieved. Lucy watched all of them and wondered what her own face would look like when it was over. Finally, after what felt like forever, Lucy and Mr. Bennett made it inside the building. The air conditioning hit her like a wave of cold water, and she shivered. A production assistant with a clipboard checked her number and pointed her toward a holding area where contestants waited to be called to the stage. The holding area was a large room filled with chairs and television screens, showing the auditions happening in real time. Lucy found a seat in the corner and watched the screen. She saw singers and dancers and comedians and magicians. She saw people pour their hearts out on that stage. Some of them succeeding, some of them failing. The judges were tough. They did not hesitate to criticize or reject someone who was not good enough. Lucy's stomach turned. What was she doing here? She could not even speak. How was she supposed to stand on that stage in front of millions of people and prove she belonged there? Mr. Bennet sat down beside her. He did not say anything for a long time. He just sat with her in the silence, letting her know she was not alone. Then, quietly, he spoke. "You know," he said, "I have been teaching music for almost 30 years. I have seen students with talent. I have seen students with passion. But I have never seen anyone play the way you play, Lucy. When you sit at that piano, something happens. Something I cannot explain. It is like the music comes alive inside you." Lucy looked at him but did not respond. "I know you are scared," Mr. Bennet continued. "Anyone would be scared. But I need you to remember something. You do not have to say a single word out there. You just have to play. And when you play, Lucy, you say more than words ever could." Lucy felt her eyes sting with tears she refused to let fall. She nodded once, a small movement that meant more than any speech. An hour later, her number was called. The walk to the stage felt like the longest journey of her life. Her legs were shaking. Her hands were cold. A production assistant led her down a dark hallway and stopped at a set of heavy curtains. Beyond those curtains was the stage. Beyond the stage was an audience of thousands. Beyond the audience were 4 judges who would decide her fate. "When you hear your name, walk out and stand on the mark," the assistant said. "Good luck." Lucy nodded. She took a deep breath. And then she heard it. "Please welcome contestant number 412, Lucy Miller." The curtains parted, and Lucy stepped into the light. The stage was enormous. Bigger than anything she had ever seen. The lights were so bright, she could barely make out the faces in the audience. But she could feel them, thousands of eyes watching her, waiting to see what she would do. She walked to the center of the stage and stood on the mark, a small piece of tape on the floor. The judges were sitting behind a long table, about 20 feet in front of her. There were 4 of them, all famous, all powerful, all looking at her with curiosity. The head judge, a man named Richard Cole, leaned into his microphone. He was known for being harsh but fair. "Hello there," he said with a polite smile. "What is your name?" "Sweetheart?" Lucy did not answer. She stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the piano that waited for her at the side of the stage. Richard waited a moment, then glanced at the other judges. "Are you nervous? It is okay to be nervous. Just tell us a little about yourself." Silence. The audience began to murmur. People shifted in their seats. The other judges exchanged confused looks. One of them, a woman named Victoria Hayes, leaned forward with a frown. "Can you hear us, dear?" she asked. A production assistant rushed onto the stage and whispered something into Richard's ear. His eyebrows rose. He looked at Lucy with a new expression, something between surprise and doubt. "I see," he said slowly. "It seems our contestant does not speak." The murmur in the audience grew louder. Lucy could hear scattered laughter, whispers, people wondering what kind of joke this was. Her cheeks burned, but she did not move. She did not look away. She had spent her whole life being laughed at. She was not going to let it stop her now. Richard studied her for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and gestured toward the piano. "Well," he said, "I suppose you will have to show us another way. Whenever you are ready." Lucy walked to the piano. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She sat down on the bench and placed her fingers on the keys. They felt cool and familiar, like the hands of an old friend. She did not start playing right away. She waited. She let the noise of the audience fade into nothing. She let the lights and the cameras and the judges disappear. She closed her eyes and thought about her mother. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about every lonely night and every silent tear and every moment she had wished she could just say something. Anything. And then she began to play. The first note floated into the silence like a single drop of rain falling into a still pond. It was soft, almost fragile, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the audience stop breathing. The whispers died. The laughter faded. And for one perfect moment, there was nothing in that massive auditorium except the sound of Lucy Miller's hands on the piano. She had chosen Chopin's Ballade, No. 1-inch G minor. It was the same piece Mr. Bennet had recorded months ago, the piece that had gone viral and brought her to this stage. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, Lucy was not playing in an empty music room for an audience of one. Tonight, she was playing for the whole world. And something inside her knew this was the moment she had been waiting for her entire life. The opening melody was gentle and searching, like a question without an answer. Lucy's fingers moved across the keys with a tenderness that seemed impossible for someone so young. Her eyes were closed. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm. She was not just playing the music. She was living inside it, breathing it, becoming it. In the audience, people began to lean forward in their seats. They did not know what they were hearing, but they knew it was something special. A woman in the third row put her hand over her heart. A man near the back wiped his eyes and did not even realize he was crying. The music grew. It built slowly, layer upon layer, like clouds gathering before a storm. Lucy's hands moved faster now, striking the keys with more force, more passion. The notes tumbled over each other, chasing and colliding, creating a sound that was both beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. At the judges' table, Richard Cole sat completely still. His arms were crossed over his chest, and his face showed nothing. But his eyes never left Lucy. Beside him, Victoria Hayes had stopped taking notes. Her pen hung frozen in the air, forgotten. The other two judges, a famous singer named Thomas Wright and a Broadway director named Elizabeth Porter, watched with their mouths slightly open. The middle section of the piece arrived, and Lucy played it like a prayer. The melody was softer here, more intimate, like a secret being shared between two people who understood each other without words. It made you think of things you had lost, people you had loved, moments that had slipped through your fingers before you could hold on to them. In the darkness of the audience, Mr. Bennet sat with tears streaming down his face. He had heard Lucy play 100 times, but he had never heard her play like this. This was not just music. This was her soul, laid bare for everyone to see. Every note was a piece of her story. Every phrase was a chapter of her life. And he realized, sitting there in that crowded auditorium, that Lucy was finally saying all the things she had never been able to say out loud. The storm arrived without warning. Lucy's hands crashed down on the keys, and the music exploded into something wild and fierce. The notes came faster and faster, tumbling like waves in a hurricane. Her whole body moved with the force of the sound, her shoulders rising and falling, her head thrown back, her fingers flying across the keyboard like they had a life of their own. The audience gasped. Some people grabbed the arms of their chairs. Others pressed their hands to their mouths in shock. No one had expected this. No one had been prepared for the raw power that was pouring out of this silent teenage girl. Victoria Hayes felt her eyes fill with tears. She pressed her hand to her mouth and tried to hold back a sob. She had been a judge on this show for 8 years. She had seen thousands of performers, but she had never felt anything like this. The music was reaching inside her chest and squeezing her heart until she could barely breathe. The climax of the piece arrived like thunder. Lucy played the final passages with everything she had, her fingers striking the keys so hard, it seemed like the piano might break apart. The sound filled the auditorium, bouncing off the walls, shaking the air itself. And then, with one final crashing chord, it was over. Silence. Lucy's hands hovered over the keys, trembling. Her chest was heaving. Her face was wet with tears. She did not remember crying. She opened her eyes slowly, like she was waking up from a dream, and looked down at the piano like she did not recognize it. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. And then the audience erupted. The applause was like nothing Lucy had ever heard. It crashed over her in waves, thousands of people clapping and cheering and screaming at the same time. People jumped to their feet, one after another, until the entire auditorium was standing. The sound was so loud, it shook the floor beneath her feet. Lucy sat frozen at the piano, overwhelmed. She did not know what to do. She had never experienced anything like this in her life. All those years of silence, all those years of being invisible, and now thousands of strangers were on their feet, applauding her like she was something special. At the judges' table, something unprecedented was happening. Richard Cole, the toughest judge on the panel, the man who never showed emotion, was standing up. His chair scraped back, and he rose to his feet, clapping slowly and deliberately. One by one, the other judges followed. Victoria was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. Thomas had his hand over his heart. Elizabeth was shaking her head in disbelief. A standing ovation from the judges. It had never happened before in the history of the show. The applause continued for a full 2 minutes before Richard raised his hand and asked for silence. It took another minute for the crowd to calm down enough for him to speak. "I have been doing this for 23 years, Richard said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have judged every kind of performer you can imagine. Singers, dancers, musicians, artists from every corner of the world. And I can honestly say, in all those years, I have never experienced anything like what just happened on this stage." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "You did not say a single word to us, not one. And somehow, you told us everything. You told us about pain. You told us about loss. You told us about hope. You made us feel things we did not even know we were carrying inside us." He shook his head slowly, like he still could not believe what he had witnessed. That was not just a performance. That was a conversation, and it was the most powerful conversation I have ever had. Victoria leaned into her microphone, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "I do not even know what to say," she admitted. "I am supposed to give you feedback, tell you what you did well and what you could improve. But honestly, I cannot think of a single thing. You were perfect. Absolutely perfect." Thomas spoke next, his voice thick with emotion. "I have worked with some of the greatest musicians in the world. Grammy winners, concert pianists, people who have dedicated their entire lives to music. And I have never seen anyone play with the kind of soul you just showed us. You have a gift, young lady. A gift that comes along once in a generation." Elizabeth was the last to speak. She looked at Lucy with something like wonder in her eyes. "You know what amazes me the most? You taught yourself. No lessons. No fancy music school. Just you and a piano. And somehow, you became this. I do not understand it, but I am so grateful I got to witness it." Richard picked up his voting card and held it high for the cameras to see. 4 yeses. A unanimous decision. "Welcome to the next round," he said with a smile. "And Lucy, thank you. Thank you for reminding us why we do this." Lucy stood up slowly from the piano bench. Her legs were shaking. Her heart was pounding. But for the first time in her life, she did not feel invisible. She felt seen. The weeks that followed the audition were a blur. Lucy advanced through round after round of the competition, each performance more powerful than the last. She played Debussy and Rachmaninoff and Liszt. She played pieces that made audiences weep and pieces that made them leap to their feet in joy. And through it all, she never spoke a single word. The media could not get enough of her. Newspapers called her the silent pianist. Television shows ran segments about the mysterious girl who communicated only through music. Her story spread across the internet, touching millions of people who saw themselves in her struggle. Foster children wrote letters, saying she gave them hope. Abuse survivors said her music helped them heal. Parents who had lost children said listening to her play made them feel close to their loved ones again. Lucy did not know how to handle any of it. She had spent her whole life trying to disappear, and now suddenly the whole world wanted to see her. It was terrifying and overwhelming and wonderful, all at the same time. Mr. Bennet stayed by her side through everything. He became her unofficial manager, handling interview requests, and shielding her from reporters who pushed too hard. He made sure she had quiet spaces to practice and rest. He reminded her, again and again, that she did not owe anyone anything. She was there to play music. Everything else was just noise. The finale of the competition arrived on a warm night in June. 10 contestants remained, and Lucy was one of them. The theater was packed with thousands of people, and millions more were watching at home. This was the biggest audience Lucy had ever faced, and for the first time since the audition, she felt the old fear creeping back. She sat backstage in a small dressing room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her hands were shaking. Her stomach was tight with nerves. In 30 minutes, she would walk onto that stage and play for the last time in this competition. And she had no idea if she was ready. There was a soft knock on the door. Mr. Bennet stepped inside and sat down in the chair beside her. He did not say anything at first. He just sat with her in the silence, the way he always did. "You know," he finally said, "win or lose tonight, you have already done something incredible. You have shown the world that there is more than one way to have a voice. You have inspired people who thought they were invisible. That matters more than any trophy." Lucy looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but she did not let the tears fall. "Whatever happens out there," Mr. Bennet continued, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. Not because of your talent, not because of your success, but because of who you are. You have been through things that would have broken most people. And instead of giving up, you found a way to turn your pain into something beautiful." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was old and faded, with creased edges and worn corners. He handed it to Lucy. It was a picture of a woman sitting at a piano. She had dark hair and kind eyes, and a smile that looked familiar somehow. Lucy stared at it, confused. "I did some research," Mr. Bennet said quietly. "I hope you do not mind. That woman is your mother. She played piano too. Lucy. She was quite good. Actually, she played at her church every Sunday until the week before you were born." Lucy's hands trembled as she held the photograph. She had almost no memories of her mother. Just fragments. A voice singing lullabies. A warm embrace. The smell of perfume. But she had never known her mother played piano. She had never known they shared this connection. "I think she would be very proud of you tonight," Mr. Bennet said. "I think she has been proud of you all along." Lucy clutched the photograph to her chest and let the tears fall. She cried for her mother and her father and her grandmother. She cried for the little girl who had lost everything and the teenager who had found a way to survive. She cried for all the years of silence and all the music that had saved her life. When her name was called, Lucy walked onto the stage with the photograph tucked safely in her pocket. She sat down at the grand piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and played like she had never played before. She did not win the competition. When the votes were counted and the results announced, Lucy came in third place. A young singer from Texas took the top prize, and a violinist from New York came in second. But as Lucy stood on that stage with her bronze trophy, she did not feel disappointed. She felt free, because she had already won something far more important than a competition. She had found her voice, and nothing could ever take that away. The months after the finale brought changes Lucy never expected. 3 of the best music schools in the country offered her full scholarships. A famous documentary filmmaker asked to tell her story. A nonprofit organization for foster children invited her to become their ambassador. Doors that had been closed her entire life suddenly swung wide open. But the biggest change came 6 months later, at a charity concert for foster youth. Lucy was scheduled to perform, just like she had dozens of times since the competition. But this time, something felt different. The concert hall was filled with foster children from across the state. They sat in their seats with wide eyes, watching this girl who looked like them, who had lived like them, who had somehow made it to the other side. Lucy walked onto the stage and sat at the piano. She played a short piece, something gentle and hopeful. And when she finished, she did something she had not done in public for 11 years. She spoke. Her voice was rough and quiet, barely louder than a whisper. But the microphone picked it up, and her words echoed through the silent hall. "Music saved my life," she said. "I hope it saves someone else's too." The audience erupted into applause. Children jumped to their feet. Adults wiped tears from their eyes. And Lucy stood at the piano, trembling, overwhelmed, but smiling. Actually smiling. That night, Lucy announced the creation of her foundation. She called it Silent Voices. Its mission was simple: to provide music education to children in foster care. Children who felt invisible. Children who needed a way to express what words could not say. Today, Silent Voices has helped thousands of children learn to play instruments. It has built music rooms in group homes and funded scholarships for young musicians. It has given hope to kids who thought they had none. And Lucy Miller? She became a concert pianist who performs in the greatest halls around the world. She still does not give many interviews. She still prefers silence in her daily life. But when she sits at a piano, she speaks louder than anyone in the room. She was once a girl who lost everything. A girl who stopped talking because the pain was too deep for words. A girl the world overlooked and forgot. But she found another language, a language of notes and chords and melodies, a language that needed no words at all. Lucy Miller barely spoke for 11 years. But the world heard her anyway, and they will never forget the sound of her voice.